Japan is often considered a haven of public transport, with its extensive network of trains, subways, buses, and bullet trains connecting the nation. With Google Maps and enough walking, I feel as though I can go anywhere, which is a testament to its efficiency. In the United States, public transportation is almost non-existent, so in comparison, Japan seems light years ahead. However, I noticed that some of these expectations of Japan's public transit system are unrealistic, perhaps because it's so much more advanced than the US. Let me explain. I first arrived in Japan at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. Being Tokyo's centralmost international airport, it is well connected to Tokyo's rail network. Having been to Japan once before, I simply used one of my old IC cards to hop on a train going towards my hotel. This brings me to my first point, IC cards. IC cards are an incredible way to make a vast network of trains a little less complex. Rather than buy a ticket to your destination station, you could simply tap your IC card when you enter a station and when you exit a station. At the end, the fare total is calculated for you and automatically subtracted from your card. If you're from the States, it's similar to the New York City's Metro card. However, IC cards can be used at convenience stores, vending machines, and even some arcades, making them far more useful. While these cards are extremely useful, obtaining one in Tokyo for a long stay can be a bit tricky. Due to a so-called chip shortage, normal Suica cards have been difficult to find in many Tokyo stations, even for locals. Only being obtainable in some major stations, tourists are encouraged instead to get the welcome Suica card. This Suica card is great because it has no deposit, but unfortunately it expires in 28 days, making it unusable for stays like mine that are around 3 months. So what should you do to get an IC card in Tokyo? What do locals do to get an IC card in Tokyo? JRE's answer? You shouldn't. Instead, you should opt for a digital IC card. Suica cards can be added to your digital wallet and easily tapped at any of the stations just as you would with a physical IC card. Even better, they can be loaded anytime, anywhere. That is, if you have an iPhone. As someone who owned a Western Samsung phone, I was shocked to find out that there was no way to add a digital IC card. For any phone that is not Japanese, or not an iPhone, there's just simply no way to add a digital IC card. If I didn't already have an IC card coming into Japan, it would have been a real hassle to get an IC card, something which is a necessity to navigate Tokyo. Luckily, if you're visiting somewhere outside of Tokyo for more than a month and you don't have an iPhone, you should be okay. This shortage of IC card really only applies to Suica, and not many of the other IC card providers that can be found in JR West Line such as Ikoka. Furthermore, there's no exclusivity between these IC card providers, so there's basically no difference between them other than the design on the front. After 2 weeks of using Tokyo's trains, I felt like I'd become a trained master in one of the world's biggest cities. I was confident I could master the train network for my next 2 weeks in Kyoto, but what I didn't know was how little there would be to master. Outside of Tokyo metropolitan area, trains are far less convenient. Only stopping at major stations, you'll find yourself using buses far more to get close to your destinations. However, buses are inferior to trains for many reasons. In Tokyo, if a train is even a minute late, it is a catastrophe. You most likely hear a sincere apology over the speaker at the station, and any longer delays would be national news. However, a bus being 5 minutes late is terribly normal. Not only are buses far less punctual, but they're also far slower. With constant stops, traffic lights, and pedestrian crossings, it's worse than riding a local train across town. To make matters even worse, they're far less comfortable. Being smaller than trains, there are far less seats, making it almost impossible to find a seat during peak times or busy routes, and God have mercy on you if you try to do both at the same time. Furthermore, since buses are on roads instead of tracks, I often find that they are more prone to bumps and sudden stops. With all of these factors in mind, you probably wish that you were back in Tokyo for its public transport system. While my review of Japanese public transport might seem overwhelmingly negative, this couldn't really be further from the truth. In reality, the Japanese transportation system, even today, is among the most advanced in the world for a nation of its size. However, Japan is often portrayed in the media as a kind of public transport utopia. I expected when I first entered Japan that the entire nation would be as well connected as Tokyo. However, my expectations were broken when I realized that I needed to walk a total of over 20 minutes to get to some destinations in Kyoto, which is still one of Japan's largest cities. Coming to Japan has demystified its public transport system, and it's given me a far more realistic look at the nation's public transit. Next, I'd like to talk about shrines and temples. Being the second time I came to Japan for an extended stay, I thought there was little that could surprise me. Having come for an engineering-based study abroad program, I didn't get a full appreciation for shrines and temples. To be completely honest, I didn't even really know the difference between them. When I saw the itinerary for this year's program, I was conflicted. I already visited many of the sites before, and I thought it would be boring to revisit them. However, I couldn't have been more wrong. This program has really defied my expectations of shrines and temples being boring. First, I'd like to discuss major temples and shrines. I define major temples and shrines as ones that are heavily visited by domestic and foreign tourists alike and are well known in media exported overseas. A few examples of major temples and shrines would include, for example, Kinkakuji, Kiyomizu-dera, and Sensoji. I visited all of these cultural sites for the first time when I went to Japan, and I didn't really expect much to change in terms of my opinion of them. However, the first major change I experienced came with readings. Over the course of this program, my perspective on temples and shrines changed a lot. The first time I came to Japan, I didn't really understand why people like shrines and temples so much. Was it because they had seen them on popular social media platforms like Instagram or YouTube? Or maybe it was because they were obsessed with the idea of experiencing Japan. But to me, shrines and temples were admittedly kind of boring, even though I wanted them to be interesting. Kiyomizu-dera defied my expectations though. With an understanding of the temple and the many things inside of it, I found the experience a lot more enjoyable. Whether it be the tunnel that rebirths you, the waterfalls that give you good fortune, or the impossible task of lifting the spear, I felt that there was a lot that was hidden to me the first time I visited temples and shrines in Japan. I wish I had a better understanding of these sites the first time I came to Japan, because now I can say that there's something that I really enjoy visiting. Next, I'd like to talk about small temples and shrines. The second thing that surprised me about shrines and temples in Japan is just how many there are. Walking down the streets of Kyoto, you can find small shrines and temples everywhere. There's something incredible about seeing a shrine situated in downtown Kyoto, in between two department stores or next to a round one arcade. Travel channels on social media such as YouTube are quick to highlight many of the previously discussed major shrines and temples scattered throughout Japan, ignoring the small ones that make up the vast majority. Furthermore, I didn't really realize how these shrines are so important to local communities. For example, when I visited Chiba Prefecture for the Tokyo Bay Pokemon Center, I left the huge shopping mall and explored the local town a little bit. About 20 minutes by foot, I found a shrine named Ohi Shrine. This shrine was dedicated to Amaterasu, the sun goddess. This shrine has a rich history and has been part of the community for over 1,000 years, though it has been reconstructed several times. I noticed that it contained many smaller shrines within it, or auxiliary shrines. As the only foreigner there when I visited, I saw many locals praying, enjoying the beautiful weather, and taking pictures of the shrine. After going to this shrine I admittedly at first knew nothing about, I felt a stronger connection to Funabashi Chiba, a town primarily known for the Lalaport shopping center, at least for tourists. My expectations of shrines and temples being a place where tourists try to get the best picture for Instagram have been shattered over the course of this program. For the remaining time I have left in Japan, I'd like to visit more of these landmarks of smaller communities. Another unexpected thing I'd like to talk about is food. Japan is known for having some of the best cuisine in the world. Despite its praise, I still think that it's underrated. I have yet to go to a restaurant in Japan that serves bad food. In addition, because of how the yen is devalued, it's incredibly cheap. One thing that has surprised me about restaurants in Japan is that you call over the waiter most of the time. This would be incredibly rude in the United States as it implies that the service is bad. However, in Japan, the waiter or waitress often won't even come unless you say sumimasen. Finally, my last unexpected thing I'd like to talk about is arcades. Japan has the best arcades I've ever been to. In comparison, there are far less American arcades and their games are ancient. Japanese arcades have state-of-the-art rhythm games, metal games, crane games, and much more. My favorite arcade round one has bowling, karaoke, and sometimes even spocha. Spocha is like an all-you-can-eat buffet of sports and fun activities like batting cages, roller skating, etc. The best part is that you pay for the time rather than the activity, so you can switch between them as much as you want. I did spocha for the first time recently, and it completely blew my expectations of what an arcade could be. These are just some of the many things that defied my expectations of Japan from mainly popular media. There's much more that I could mention, but unfortunately, I just don't really have enough time, so I encourage anyone who is interested and is watching this video, who hasn't already, to please go to Japan as it's a wonderful nation with many hidden features and cultural differences from the United States.